I remember my first night at Blythewood. I was in my room alone, and this older undergraduate appeared in a t-shirt and a pair of jeans, ready to move in. Well, I came from South Orange. I was well brought up. I didn't really want to have anything to do with somebody who looked so wild and disheveled as this young man in question. So I just simply let him know that I wasn't interested, but I appreciated the visit all the same. And he left. Well, that was just the beginning. Then came the fun and games with Arlene and Barbara, my friends whom I brought there from
No. What was the thing that made you guys report him? I mean, that is like the worst.
Oh, no, I haven't said that yet. Let me just, there are other things to tell.
You ruined it.
We used to enjoy putting on a series of dramas when the night watchman came by. And with Arlene and Barb, we used to jump on the bed and make sexual sounds and pretend, we were having an orgy, so as to distress the night watchman. That was just one of our pranks. Whose name was John Bard, and his connection to our college was always in question. I should say that there was a couple living in an apartment, and they were the proctors in the dorm, and the wife was perfectly nice and went to work, and the husband seemed to be always around. And he would just appear in the room, and there was something wrong with him sexually. His eyes would go funny, and you knew something was going on with him. And when I would walk to class across the campus from Blythewood, he would sometimes run up to walk beside me and say, "Did you know that you walk like a man?" He said, "I could help you with that." Well,
what the hell did he mean?
He was trying to come on to me sexually. He was making some kind of peculiar pass. And one night, I was in the lounge downstairs, the salon of the living room, and somebody began to speak about this guy and had had a similar experience. Before you knew it, all of us, all the women in the dormitory, had been, exposed to this peculiar behavior. So we decided to go and tell our story to Dorothy Dulles-Bourne, who was the Dean of Students. And we set up an appointment, we all went, and we all told our stories. And to be sure, the guy was...
He was done.
He was dismissed, but he was not... he was recommended so that he went actually to a boys' school, Lafayette, afterwards. It was a bit like the Catholic Church, in universities and colleges. If somebody acted out and misbehaved and was a bit weird, why, they just were not blacklisted, but could go on to some other school where no doubt they indulged in some other peculiar form of behavior.
Well, maybe if someone had pressed charges, he would have not gotten that recommendation.
Well, we did go to Dorothy Dulles-Bourne, but Dorothy Dulles-Bourne was famously lenient.
But I mean, it was a badly administered school, I said.
Hey, Dave, I can't put that on video. We can't throw Bard under the bus.
We don't want to. Just stay out of it. It's not your school. It's my school.
You want to talk about Harvard College and Radcliffe? Fine, but that's another video. Let Pat tell the story.
Well, there was this one girl who lived in Blythewood that year. And maybe she came actually in September. because that was the first semester, my January to June, and I just loved the place so much I didn't want to go home. So I arranged to stay longer and continue to go down to the swimming pool. One day there was a big hubbub because this couple were seen going down to the pool, and the guy was teaching on the faculty and actually was a distinguished poet. But he and his wife were enormous, absolutely enormous. And the two of them had put on swimming costumes and were on their way down to the pool. Well, the news was out, and everybody from the campus came running down to the pool to see this pair.
Is this Kelly?
Why? What were they doing? Having
Robert
sex?
Kelly and his wife.
What
They
were
were
they
just
doing?
extremely fat. You know, it was like traffic had to go one way when they walked down the street. Later, Robert Kelly lost a lot of weight, and he was a good poet. And he and his wife got divorced, and I think he may have married a student,
Not
as people did in those
that-
days.
Not that.
Students were considered fair game, and it should be said that from the moment I arrived, I was taken up by various faculty members. I took Introduction to Literature with John Simon, known as the Bad John Simon, who wrote for New York Magazine, and who was, in fact, quite a gifted poet and translator. And after my first class in Introduction to Literature, he invited me out on a date. Well, he was rather brilliant, and I was somewhat flattered. And so we went out, and, you know, he actually invited me to New York to meet his parents, and was, I believe, very interested in marrying me. But, being a very sensible girl, he being, 38, which seemed like practically dead, I couldn't possibly see myself with such an old man. However, I did enjoy his company. But when he got ill one time, he called me up and asked me to come and help take care of him. And it turned out that while he was very, very sick, he was somehow after me, and I had to climb out the window and run back to my door. And that was the end of that.
We once met him in New York to go see the Brass of Aguirre.
Well, the next semester, when I came back, I had already spoken to him. We had gone out a bit, and I enjoyed his company, and he used to enact the latest English musical comedy and translate from this or that language into English poetry that interested him. He was incredibly amusing, and I did appreciate his company. But at the end of the term, I said, I think I'd better have another advisor next semester, if you don't mind. And when I arrived back and came to the gym to register for courses, I learned that he was still my advisor. And I said, Professor Simon, could I speak to you privately? He says, I don't see why you can't speak to me right here. After all, we didn't sleep together.
So he wasn't American. Where was he from? Germany?
Czechoslovakia. Well, at the table was Ralph Ellison.
Is this freshman year,
Ted-
sophomore year? When
Sophomore year, Ted Weiss,
What year was this? 60, 59?
58. Elizabeth Stamler, Irma Brandeis, all sitting at a long table, and everybody laughing. I didn't sleep with you, after all. Why can't you speak to me right here? Well, I was mortified, of course. And he decided to give me to the person he had least respect for, and certainly thought I would never like. And so my advisor became my future husband. End of story for now. You
Why
can-
don't you want to mention his name? He can't sue you for that. Just say his name.
So my advisor sophomore year was Eugene Goodhart. And I took the 19th century novel with him, and my great interest in being in his class was watching how long he could smoke his cigarette, the ash growing longer and longer and longer as he spoke, before the ash would drop. Such were the hijinks of a girl of my age. I was high-spirited, and he was amusing to me. And, well, it wasn't long before we started to spend time together, and we used to walk through to the mansion. What was the mansion called? Not Blythewood, but another one. And we'd go take walks there.
Zabriskie?
No. We'd meet down by the nurse's office along the river road, and we'd take walks together and talk.
What part of the campus was it near? Like if you were in
It was another property which the Bard had acquired.
I know, but what, if you were in the middle of where the classrooms were?
It was to the right, not to the left. Blythewood was to the left.
Down a hill or up toward toward the river? Or?
No, away from the river. Do I have to go on? Isn't that enough for now?
Oh, let's hear something about your friendship with Saul Bellow.
Well, let me tell you first about taking...
Going back to freshman year, that's when you met Saul Bellow at the swimming pool, right?
I think I may have met him sophomore year.
And
My
then
freshman year.
was he were the dinner party? Who was at those dinner parties? Like Saul Bellow, Gore Vidal.
That was later.
That was later.
Yeah. The great thing that happened to me was getting Irma Brandeis for Common Course. And she was an extraordinary woman, really rather brilliant. She had been the amanuensis of a famous Italian
Montale.
poet by the name of Montale, and he dedicated all his books to Irma Brandeis. And she was, you know, the interesting older woman. And in sophomore year, I had her for a tutorial as well. And that is where I started to do translation of poetry and prose from the French with her. And I would prepare for these seminars, these tutorials, for about 24 hours, and I had a perfect recall of text for at least 10 days, so, you know, I was a pretty engaging student. And she would arrive from New York on the train, and she'd bring all kinds of treats, which we would share during the tutorial. Wonderful little pastries, one thing or another. I loved her dearly. And I was her best student, which was, you know, quite a joy and a privilege. Sophomore year, I had also divisional seminar with Ted Weiss, and we read Homer, and we read Thucydides and Herodotus, and I don't know whom all we read. I'd have to think about it. It was a wonderful course. So Bard, you know, being a student was my great passion, I have to say. If I had a great passion, it was for being a student, not for any other kind of activity. And I was taken up by various faculty members and invited to everything, and whenever anybody of interest came.
Let's not get all global in general. That's boring. If you want to talk more, tell me about some instance that was really neat at some kind of gathering with you know, the greats. Some kind of thing that you remember.
Well, it was through Irma that I was
Doesn't have to be
introduced.
like an actual thing that someone said, but
Yeah.
just an evening that was quite interesting.
Through Irma, I would be invited to dinner at her house with Anthony Hecht, who was a distinguished American poet, and James Merrill. And so, you know, I got to know various poets and so forth because Irma took me up. But I don't think I want to go on talking.
You're bored. You want to talk about this tomorrow?
Not really. I mean, that's enough for tonight.
Alright.